So we're just going to talk about education today and the way that it affects Kansas overall, as well as the way that it affects District 98. So first of all, to actually get in on one side of this, can you remember the earliest like personal moment or experience that you can recall that brought the issue of education, like made it important to you in your life?
Made it important to me for my life. I guess probably not when I was in school, because when you're in school, you're always wishing you weren't in school most of the time. Um, when I began coaching at campus high school in 1991, uh, and started talking to students about actually being student athletes, I think that's when it kind of started hitting me. Is that's the title, is student athletes, and you have to make sure the kids understand that they're students first, and that starts to kind of make you focus on the importance of the education of actually being a student in a school, because you are learning to uh, not only learning math, language, social studies, and science and other things, you're uh, learning how you're going to help society, how you're going to be a part of society, how you're going to sustain uh, your way of life. And I think that's probably just when I started coaching and started talking about student athletes that I really started to focus on how important education is.
To go off of that a little bit, you work with student athletes a lot, and you said, when did you start coaching student?
1990, 1991.
Okay, and have you been coaching student athletes since that time?
I have, yes.
How many sports, like how many schools or different sports are you involved with?
Um, Technically, I started coaching for the school district in 1991. I started coaching for Special Olympics in like 1986 and volunteered with them since 1980, well, no, since 1978 when I was a seventh grader. And I coached Special Olympics for over 20 years. And those were kids from 8 years old all the way up to, well, we had people that were over 30 years old on the team. But yes, I started coaching at the high school in 1991, swimming, boys and girls. I've coached C team and A team volleyball at Hayesville Middle School. I did that for about 7 years. I've coached Little League soccer. I've coached Little League volleyball. I've coached Little League basketball. Um, I coached the summer swim team, helped coach the summer swim team here in Hayesville now, the Piranhas. So I've coached a lot of different. I've coached soccer at Little League. So I've coached all ages of kids and all pretty much all levels of kids.
And a lot of those different coaching experiences had to do with having your kids on those teams. But what do you think the balance is between coaching experiences that you went into that involved your kids and ones that you just felt that the value of coaching was something that you wanted to offer?
Well, I've coached girls swimming since 1991, and my only daughter didn't swim for me. So I did coach her in Little League volleyball. Um, I coached my oldest son in basketball, and my two youngest sons I coached in soccer, and I think that's it. Dane did swimming. So I coached Dane in swimming, and that was at the high school and Little League. Um, I enjoy coaching. I enjoy interacting with young people, helping them grow, watching them mature. Uh, and what's really cool is that, like when I was coaching volleyball at the middle school, when I started coaching, I was coaching C team. We practiced at 6 a.m. in the morning. So I was going in, and I would basically have to open up the building. The building's pitch black. I get in there, get everything turned on. I had 25 girls on the team. 25 girls would show up at 6 o'clock. We'd practice volleyball, and I still, to this day, that would have been in the late 90s. I still have girls that I coached on that team that I'm friends with on Facebook, and they talk to me about how uh, sometimes they'll mention that they're still playing volleyball at the Y or doing something like that, and just how much they appreciated the way my coaching style with kids is to make sure that they get a play, or they get to. You're going to get better if you play, whether you're struggling or not. And they scrimmaged a lot and we play a lot, and it just helps them. I try to get them to enjoy the sport for the sport. Just because you may not be able to do something competitively through high school and college and everything, but you can still do it to stay healthy in any sports like that. I just enjoy working with kids and watching them grow and mature. And I have many, many friends now that I used to coach, people that I stay in contact with, and they'll ask me questions. And now they're old enough that I ask them questions.
All right. So recentering on education in general, and kind of moving to the other side, from a policy standpoint, what are two things that have happened in Topeka that you think the average Kansan should know? Like, what are the two biggest, most impactful, whether it was a bill or a controversy or a change that people don't understand?
Well, I'm going to go with a not so good thing and a good thing. Not so good thing would be in the middle of the night a few years back when they were debating uh, finances, school funding. Uh, at the last minute, they threw in something and they took away due process for teachers in the state. What due process is basically means that after a teacher has been somewhere uh, has signed 3 contracts and worked 3 years, a principal or a superintendent or a school board member can't just come in and say you're fired. Uh, they can come in and tell you that we're not going to renew your contract, but they have to tell you why they're not going to renew your contract. And if you don't agree with that reason, you have a right to meet with them and get a moderator and try to decide whether or not that's really a legitimate reason. It basically protects teachers so that if a teacher does something that upsets a principal or upsets a board member, or unfortunately, this could happen in a small town. You makes a powerful person in town that maybe owns a business or maybe somebody that's on a smaller town school board, and say you're a coach or you're a teacher and you give a student a bad grade or you have to cut a kid off of a team, and that upsets that one person. They can't go and convince the principal, hey, you're going to have a really bad time, or the superintendent, hey, I'm going to give you a really bad time if you don't fire this teacher. They have to have documentation. It's a protection for teachers to make sure that they don't get in trouble for advocating for their students. If let's say a student comes out as lesbian or gay, and uh, there's one church in that community, and that church is really powerful, and there's a lot of people in that community from that church. They can't say we need to fire that teacher because he's supporting what we don't believe in here, if that's what that church happened to believe. It's a protection for teachers. Teachers weren't getting paid a lot in the state, and so teachers started leaving. What people don't understand is one other reason teachers are leaving the state is because they don't have due process protections. Um, a lot of districts have written due process things into their contracts. You'll see that in a lot of bigger districts. Hayesville, USD 261, where I am, they've written that in. I believe Wichita 259 does, and Derby. There's ones around here do. Smaller districts have not done that, and those teachers, basically somebody that's been teaching for 20 years, if they made the wrong person mad or get somebody upset, they can get released just like a brand new teacher that just isn't doing a good job teaching, and they don't have to tell them why they're not being re-signed. Uh, so that happened, and that's had an impact on keeping teachers in the state, keeping uh, long-term, solid, good teachers in the state, because they'll go somewhere where they can get those protections. They also want to feel free to advocate for their students.
A question about that. Do you think that the state is losing good teachers primarily because they are choosing to leave, or because they are becoming victims of the lack of due process, and they're being forced out?
Right now, I think it probably has to do with choosing to leave. They're not. I haven't heard of incidents of that happening yet. However, the reason Kansas teachers got due process is because that did happen up in a district up around the Topeka area. I think in the 70s, and that's why we got due process, was because two female teachers got fired for no reason. I mean, they got somebody upset and they were relieved, and they went and they sued the district and went all the way to the Kansas Supreme Court, and they found that we should get due process. Um, the good thing is that uh, the last year I was in the legislature, we actually passed a new funding formula for schools that the Supreme Court has found to be uh, adequate and equitable. And we are in the middle of that right now. Districts have an idea of how much money they're going to get increased every year. Now it's just a matter of making sure that the legislature holds up their end of the bargain. One thing I did find when I've been up there, and since I haven't been back, right now, is that the legislature is really, really good at making really good plans and setting up things. And then they're really, really good at not following through on those things. So when the state Supreme Court said, yes, this is adequate and equitable, you guys are good. We just have to make sure now that the legislature continues to follow that, as there's an increase every year for a few years until it levels off and goes into just a CPI, or there'll be an adjustment for inflation.
Can you actually break part of that down for me? What does adequate and equitable mean?
Adequate would be how much money you get per student, and everybody's the same. So uh, we're going to give uh, Hayesville with 5,000 students this many, and Derby with this many students this many, and Wichita with this many students that many, and every student in a district is going to be, the state's going to give them the same amount of money for each student. So you have to make sure that is enough to get that student a good, solid education. But then you're going to look at, then when what's equitable comes into is where they're from, what the community's like. Let's take like Blue Valley schools in Northeast Wichita. Northeast Kansas. They have their valuation of their community, the people that live there, the money they make, the houses they own, the businesses that are there, are much more elaborate and expensive than in, say, well, Hayesville or even Wichita, for most parts of Wichita, not all. Wichita is the largest district in the state. Actually, it's the largest district in a huge area. It's bigger than Kansas City, Missouri's school district even. When you go east, you have to go all the way to St. Louis to get to a district that's bigger than Wichita. So, but you get, school districts get money from property tax as well. Well, some districts get lots and lots of money from property taxes, and other schools don't. Other districts don't, because the valuation of that community or that district is not as much as other districts. So you have to find a way to levelize that so that a student that already lives in a wealthy community isn't getting that many more perks than somebody that comes from a small farming community that doesn't have near as much money or as much population, so they can't have the same level of textbooks or as much technology, or it touches a little bit on facilities, not a lot on facilities, and I'll talk about facilities here in a minute. But teacher pay, all those things that if you live in a smaller rural community, you're going to have trouble getting teachers to come out to you and teach. You need to be able to incentivize them with pay and benefits. So they have what they call weighted, and they'll take it. If you're a special ed kid, you get weighted like a half a person. So even though you only have 29 kids, you're going to get given for 29 and a half. And you wait for how many kids are on free and reduced lunches. And there's all different kinds of ways to wait. Some of them can be 0.2 kids. Some of them can be another kid. It's all. That's why when you do a count on September 20th, all the schools give you this count. This is how many kids I had in the building. But then they say, this is how many special ed kids we have. This is how many on free and reduced. And all those add the semblance of what another student would be, and those totals add up. So even though a district may have 200 kids, it may be weighted so that they're getting money for 350 kids, even though they really don't have 350 kids. But that helps bring up, that means the schools that don't have very many special ed kids, or they don't have that many kids that are on free and reduced, they aren't punished. They just, they don't get that extra money from the state because they don't need it, because they already have the not facilities, the articles and stuff they need to be able to teach well in a class. Like I was talking about technology and textbooks, and they've got good teachers. They don't have to struggle finding teachers as much as a rural class is, but that's kind of what that means. A lot of people think that districts go overboard on facilities. What a lot of people don't understand is that education funding's broke up in different ways. School boards and school districts can only spend certain money for certain things. All school districts have a pot of money called capital improvements. Capital improvements can only be used for facilities maintenance and facility upgrades, or building new buildings, stuff like that. They can't use that money legally. They can't use that money to pay teachers. The legislature about 6 years ago did change it so that they could use that to help pay like maintenance people and custodians, because they thought that had enough to do. They freed up a little bit of what they could do with that money. But almost everybody, you'll hear people complain about school districts that are putting in new facilities or new football fields or building new gyms. What a lot of people don't understand is 95% of the time you see a district do that, the district people voted for that, and that was a bond issue, and that's being paid for locally. If you see a district that's putting a new roof on a school, there's a really good chance that that district has been saving money up in their capital outlay money so that they could do a big project like that. I know Hayesville just did that with Rex Elementary School. They've been putting money aside for years in their capital outlay because they knew they had a big expensive project coming on that they did not want to put in a bond issue. So they just paid for it. And a lot of people say, well, how can Mays just passed a bond issue to get part of the bond issue was a brand new swimming pool, swimming facility. And I know that when they start to build this, you're going to see people all over the place saying, this is ridiculous. Schools are getting too much money. Why is Mays getting this new facility? The people who live in the Mays school district voted for that facility, and they are the only people paying for it. The state's not paying for it. They're using their local dollars to build that facility. And now I say no state, some state money will be used to, well, depending on what I don't know what the valuation of Mays is off the top of my head. The state could support as much as half of that bond, but no more than that. Depends on the lowest valuations districts, the state can help fund a bond up to 50%. Some districts would pass a bond and it would not, the state would not support it at all. So it depends on what the valuation of a community is.
And is the state obligated to do that for the districts that are evaluated that way, or is it a decision that's made?
The state's obligated, and that goes back to the equity issue. They want to make sure that community that that needs new facilities can afford to get a new facility. Let's say some districts there are districts in the state that have 200 or fewer students in them. But let's say you've got a community of 200 people and they need a new elementary school. Their elementary school is, 80 years old. It's got mold. It's going to cost more money to try to fix it up than it would to build a new building. That community that's only got 200 kids in the school is not going to be able to build a new school. They would probably pass a bond and the state would be obligated, I'm going to guess with that few people, would be obligated to pay 50% of whatever the bond is that community passed. And the community would have to match that with the other 50%. And that all goes back to what the evaluation of a school district is.
Okay. So in a quick 2-sentence summary, the two most important things that have occurred in Topeka through policy that you think most people should know about are?
Uh, the taking away and of teacher due process, which also that has been brought up at least 3 more times since then, and the Senate just let it die. That passed the House twice, and the Senate just did not have a hearing on it. Senator Wagle would not allow it to come to the Senate floor. And the other thing is that the school funding is now out of the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court still has still watching over the court case, but right now schools are being funded at an adequate and equitable amount in the state of Kansas. And if the legislature follows their plan, then that should be the rule for the future.
Okay. Okay, so then stepping forward, for you've talked with a lot of people about the issue of education because you care about it quite a lot, and you believe basically that education in Kansas should have adequate funding, that we should support our students and support our teachers. Is that all correct?
Yes.
What is, when you talk to constituents, what is the most common sentiment of support that you hear? Like people that agree with you, what is the general sentiment that you hear?
Um, most people that agree with most people that agree that education is that important, they understand how important education is for the economy of the state. Uh, Tax cuts are not what brings businesses to communities or to states. What brings businesses to communities and to states are strong schools and a good feel of community, quality of life issues. And if you don't have good teachers or you have schools that are underfunded, businesses are not going to want to come here because they're not going to have people that want to bring their families here to work for them because they don't want to put their kids in those schools. They want to make sure that schools are safe, the teachers are good and caring, and that the kids are getting a 21st century education. And in Kansas, right now, they're getting all those things. We were about to lose some of that. We have lost a lot of really, really good teachers. Uh, but I think that's probably slowing down now, and I would imagine some of them will probably even come back. But that is just so important for the economy. And you always hear people joke about how, these are the people that are going to take care of me when I'm in a nursing home. We've got to make sure to keep our state vibrant and keep educated kids here working and drawing businesses here to get those educated people we have.
Okay. So then on the opposite, what is the most common complaint or objection that you hear, and how would you address their concerns?
Biggest concerns I have are people that say that schools already get too much money. And my biggest concern about that is almost everybody that says that is because there are groups out there that misconstrue what kind of money the schools get or how money's spent at the schools. And it frustrates me that people take messages from groups without actually following up and checking on things themselves to find out that that's really not true. You'll hear stories that education is 50% of the budget of Kansas, and that is absolutely untrue. It's 50% of the general fund, which is much smaller than the state budget. Um, I've heard people say that districts have built Olympic-sized pools, which is again not true. But people hear somebody in an office holding a public office or sending out mailers, and they think if they get it in the mail, it must be true. And it's not. Somebody did build a very, very nice pool up around Blue Valley, like I was talking about earlier, but that was a partnership between the community and the school district. The school district did not build it on their own. Um, so it's mostly people that think schools already get too much money, and it's almost always because they're misinformed. And we have to find a way to uh, make sure people really understand what's going on. And we need to find a way to make sure that groups that are putting out misinformation get called out on putting out misinformation.
Okay. Do you think that the issue of education and supporting it is a primary concern for most of your district? Like, do you think that you, by representing this issue, are representing a primary concern for the constituents of District 98?
Very much so. A lot of that has to do when it comes to the equity part of school finance as far as supporting District 98. Um, I have schools from Hayesville, I have schools from Derby, and I have schools from Wichita in District 98. Um, Hayesville's district goes into kind of South Wichita, and then parts of Southeast Wichita, where I have the rest of them, are not as wealthy areas of the city of Wichita as some areas are. And even in the Derby district, the couple of schools I have over there, they aren't necessarily uh, located in the more wealthy areas of Derby. So uh, making sure that equity part so that those schools and districts are making sure those schools are supported the same way other schools in highly uh, wealthy areas are getting. It's very, very important for people in District 98 to make sure that not only that they're funded adequately but equitably.
Okay. And what do you think is an example, something that you think demonstrates your dedication and care for education in Kansas? It can be a story, a statement, uh, an award.
Well, all I can think is I've been a school teacher for 20 years. I've coached for a school district since 1991. Um, my principal trusts me at my school. Uh, just caring for kids. 7 years ago, we had a kindergartner at Nelson, where I teach, that got hit by a vehicle at a crosswalk on our main street, which is about a block away from our school. It just so happened I was in the office when it happened, and I ran out and I basically got to the accident at the same time the police were getting there. And it was not something I would ever want to see again. Um, we did not think the student was going to make it. Uh, he did. Uh, I'm. They just moved to El Dorado 2 years ago. I still keep in contact with him and his mom. The child was actually holding his mom's hand. The light turned for him to walk out. He didn't look because he's a kindergartner. The thing turned white. He could walk across the street. He took a step out. Somebody had run the red light and they hit him. So uh, since that day, I've been out at the crosswalk. Every morning I'm at work, I'm at the crosswalk 25 minutes before I'm required to be at school by my contract. And when I'm not coaching anything after school, I'm out there every day after school. And when I'm not out there, Mr. Mitchner is, and I push the button, and I'm the one that walks out in traffic first to make sure that the kids get across the school first, to get across the street safely and can get to school and get home. And just the safety of kids and their future is what's most important to me about education. I want kids to live full, happy lives and to be part of a community. And I think that as an adult, that's what I need to do.
And can I ask, were you asked to start taking on the duty of crossing guard?
No, I basically told my principal I was going to go do that. I asked him to take me. I used to do bus duty every day, and I asked him to take me off bus duty and give it to somebody else because I was going to go out to the crosswalk. And he absolutely agreed with that. And like I said, on days I can't be out there, actually, he's usually out there.
Okay. And then so nearing the end here, what is a specific and deliberate action that you intend to take regarding education once you return to Topeka?
I'm going to get teacher due process back. Along with Representative Jerry Stogsdill, the 2 years I was up there, we brought that item to bring due process back just as it was before it was taken away to the House floor. Both times it passed the House floor, and it died in the Senate. And when I get back to Topeka, I'm going to get with Representative Stogsdill and we're going to run it again, and we're going to get it through one of these times, because we also have a governor that will sign it now. If we can get the Senate to actually bring it up and somehow work it in so they can get it passed, so that we can give those teachers the protections they need so that they can uh, feel safe to advocate for students if they feel like they need to advocate for students.
All right. Thank you very much. That's all of the questions that I have. Is there anything that you'd like to add regarding education today?
Uh, I would encourage people to go out and visit your local school. Just give them a call ahead of time. And if you have any questions about their school, call and ask. Teachers and administrators love to talk to community. That just doesn't have to be somebody who has a student in their building. If you have a question about your school or your district, call the school closest to you or call the superintendent's office and say, hey, I'd like to get together and talk about some things. I'm just curious. And you're probably going to get a chance to talk to somebody. Really get out and understand how important the schools are in communities.
All right. Thank you very much.